Here we go. Okay, so here we are. Finally, I was able to get the recorder to work. So this is chapter 2. And this one is basically a follow-up to chapter 1, where we will be discussing the ways special education works in the K through 12 environment. As soon as it gives it to me the way I want it to be, I'm going to minimize everybody over here on the side. Okay. So when it comes to special education, there were 3 main court cases that really affected the way special education was handled in America. The first one is the 1954 judgment between Brown versus Board of Education. And for anyone who has ever worked in education, it's one of the very first court cases that's always shared. And basically it basically ruled in favor of integration of American schools, and it did away with desegregation. And the reason why is because African American children were being separated from their Caucasian peers, and as a result, they being the court system, ruled that separate does not always mean equal, and as a result, American schools had to integrate, allowing African American children to attend the same schools as white children. Diana versus State Board of Education is another groundbreaking court case, and it actually came out of California. And I'm including a brief video on how important, let me pull it from over here over to here so that everyone has a chance to see this particular case. So I'm interested in hearing everyone's thoughts around Diana versus, let me close this out, State Board of Education. Anyone? So basically, as I have it stated here, prior to this court case ruling, all children, regardless of their native language, were being assessed with an English-based IQ test. And IQ test at the time was what was used to determine if a child needed to be in special education or not. And as you can imagine, in other classes, students have said things like, well, common sense should tell you that the students weren't going to do well because it wasn't given to them in their native language. But in 1972, I'm not saying there wasn't any common sense. I'm just saying in 1972, this is what they did. They being the education system here in California, this is how they chose to assess all children And as a result, you can imagine if your native language is not English, then of course you're not going to do well on any test, whether it's measuring IQ or anything else. So thankfully with this ruling, more children were able to not only get what they truly needed out of the education system, but in many cases, those students were pulled out of special education and placed in their general education classroom with the resources that they needed in order to be successful. The last court case that had a big impact on special education, especially here in California, is Larry P. versus Riles. So I'm going to click on this one and then pull it from over here again. Once again, really short, less than a minute and a half. Does require reading. So once again, this is about placement in special education. And what this says here, basically, because it's written over and they didn't do away with the watermark, it says the court found that these tests were indeed racially and culturally biased and ordered that these tests, meaning the IQ test, no longer can be used to identify and place Black children in these types of classes. And those types of classes are special education classes. So that's an overview of the Larry P. versus Riles case. And the thing that's interesting about this particular court case is that it is still upheld as of today. And what makes it great is that, yay, it's upheld even to 2020. What the caveat about this particular court case is it focuses on IQ tests. And to this day, in the state of California, no African American children can receive an IQ test due to this ruling. So yes, the courts did rule that the tests were culturally biased and they can't be used to determine eligibility for Black students in special education. But what that automatically did as well was keep those children from being assessed for the GATE program, which is the Gifted and Talented Education Program. And IQ tests are used for both. So the state will pay for any non-Black children to have this done for them. But if a person is of African American descent, then in order for that child's IQ to be tested, the parents, and I'm saying the parents because the child is obviously a minor, would have to pay for private assessment. So they would have to go to a psychologist or neuropsychologist or someone who is eligible to give an IQ test. I actually learned about this court ruling when we first moved here in 2008, because as I was signing my son up for services through Regional Center, which is another great resource for your resource manual, his case manager at the time shared that whereas in the Regional Center would pay for an IQ test for if my son wasn't Black, but because he was, they wouldn't be able to pay for it. Thankfully, Caleb has had many IQ tests in many different states. It doesn't really tell you much about his developmental state, except that he doesn't fit into the category of being able to take a test that, quote unquote, the average child can take. But two, nowadays, many people, many organizations, many school districts don't even rely on IQ tests to be the sole determining factor of anything. They look at a variety of tests from the Woodcock-Johnson. Just as I started to rattle them off, that's the only one I could think of. But there are a lot of tests that are used by psychologists, school psychologists, medical psychologists, psychiatrists to assess whatever the issue is the child is experiencing. So that's one of the good things. It's like IQ tests are great, but they don't truly tell you everything that you need to know about the child. So any questions about these court rulings? Okay, so the goals for the IEP is always student focused, of course, and you always want the child to have access to the core curriculum. So whatever it is their general ed peers are having access to, you want that student in special education to have access as well. Of course, this is dependent on what's appropriate. You know, if developmentally you know that they would not be able to handle going through a health course that talks about the reproductive system and possibly things along the lines of sexual education, then you're not going to want to expose that child to it regardless of their age and their grade level and what their peers are being exposed to. But there are programs within Regional Center, within ARC, which is ARC, which is also another great resource you may want to consider for your resource manual, that have different programs that are available. One of them is called SEEDS, SEEDS, and that focuses solely on sexual education for individuals with different types of developmental disabilities. And the reason why I know about SEEDS is because my son went through it. How do you go about teaching someone with an intellectual disability everything there is to know about puberty, sexual health, reproduction? You have to find a way as a parent, as an educator, to approach it at their level so they understand. My son learns very well with video modeling, and thankfully the SEEDS program does a lot of video modeling. So of course we went through a huge introductory course because it's a very detailed course. But it was basically making sure that my husband and I were aware of what our son Caleb was getting ready to be exposed to because of how detailed they had to go into sex ed, basically. And one of the reasons why parents really push for this education, this type of education for their children, is because whereas in this world of Title IX and harassment and things, there may be, us in this group, we may understand like, yes, if I engage in this behavior or if I say this thing, this could be deemed as sexual harassment or a Title IX violation. Whereas in a person with the intellectual disability, they don't get all the nuances that come in with that. They just don't. But the law doesn't. The law being the law does not take that into account. So even as being our son's conservator and everything else, we had to find a way to teach Caleb like right from wrong, what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate. It's really common when kids are little that you will hug them. There's a lot of hugging, and as caregivers, we want to snuggle them and cuddle them and all these things. But as they get older, we think about ourselves. We learn that it's inappropriate to engage in full body hugs. You don't, embrace for too long. So it's those little social cues that we learn as we grow, that those with different types of disabilities, it doesn't have to be intellectual based, they're not going to always pick up on it. And so they have to be taught. And in my son's case, he had to be taught very explicitly, like, this is a good hug, this is a bad hug. And it isn't that it's bad, but in his eyes, because he is so black and white with the way autism looks like on him, we had to be very clear. And so the SEEDS program, like I said, SEEDS, is through the Regional Center. It's a program that is through the Regional Center. It's just a great resource, and something I think a lot of people should really consider if they have a client or a family member or someone, and they have a family member who's trying to figure out how to approach this topic in an effective way. It's just an option that's out there. So when it comes to the IEP, you always wanted to access to the core curriculum, as I just discussed, one aspect of the core curriculum, and then as well as social integration. Now this can come in, like I mentioned last week, it can be PE, art, the electives. It could also be lunchtime. Pre-COVID, everyone was coming together in the courtyard or in a cafeteria and eating and congregating and socializing. And then in March, when all of this took place, including my son's class, everything else in the United States switched to Zoom or Google Classroom or some kind of online learning modality. And so, but you still wanted all children to have access to some type of socialization with their peers. And so it still holds true with the IEP. You still want social skills to be built in, social skill goals to be built in, even if it's just them learning how to enter a conversation, which is something I have found that is not really like, I don't know what it is, but even on campus with the students who do not have disabilities, students struggle with entering a conversation. Like they just don't know how to naturally enter into one. And so, whereas in a student with an IEP, like my son, he had to be taught how to do that. You know, he say, excuse me, you know, hi, you know, how to do it. But like I said, there's some people who can benefit from that, even though they don't have any type of disability. So when it comes to additional terms, when it comes to the IEP, you're going to hear things like evidence-based practices. So whenever you see evidence-based practice, think of evidence, think of research. And that's why I put it in blue here. So anything that is an evidence-based practice is verified by research on some level. A lot of times in education, you will hear people reference best practices. And so those best practices are those researched practices that have kind of risen to the top and have been effective, you know, across the board. So that could be in different types of higher education settings. It could be in different types of K through 12 settings. It might be a best practice across multiple disabilities, or it might be just something that is proven to be very effective just with a certain disability. But whenever you're, especially when you're working on your research paper, which is due in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, due week 5, you're going to be looking at different types of research based on your research problem that have proven to be very effective towards diminishing the effect of the impact of a disability on a child. So before I go forward, are there any questions so far? I'm going to grab something to drink. The mango passion fruit tea at Chick-fil-A is the absolute best ever. I just want to add that as a side note. Accommodation. So when you have an IEP, you always have accommodations. And so accommodations are put in place to help the student overcome or work around the disability. So last week I mentioned how my glasses are an accommodation because without them, you know, it's like fuzziness everywhere. But as an accommodation, I'm allowed to wear them. I need to wear them. And as a result, I'm able to drive and, you know, work and do everything I need to do. Without them, I'd just be all over the place and making all kinds of mistakes. The same is true when you put them in place in an IEP or you have them for students. If a child has, say, chronic migraines, or maybe they have a vision impairment where the bright whiteness of paper, because traditionally paper is, well, usually paper is just white, but sometimes when students stare at that white paper too long, it can cause them to have headaches. So sometimes you'll need to give them an accommodation that can either be you printing out that, that assignment, that test on a different color piece of paper, and it can be anything as just like yellow. Yellow paper has been shown to help with diminishing the impact on people's eyesight, as well as in light blue. So you find out what the student prefers. I mean, it's easy, right? It's not something that's going to cause or cost a lot of money. But if it's like, well, no, I don't have a lot of paper, or I don't have anything in my budget for paper, then you can look into having overlays, and these can be found really anywhere. And if you go to Michael's, they even have them there because they use them for like in crafts and things, and you just lay it over. So it can be a piece of kind of like vinyl, but very, very thin, or plastic, I should say, and it's different colored. So even if it's a white piece of paper, once you lay that, say, red paper, that red overlay on it, and it's not like a bold red, it's like a light tint of a red. It gives a tint to the white paper, and then the student can still get what they need. So then you have modifications. Modifications change the standard or the content being learned in some type of way. I bring this up because modifications are allowed in the K through 12 setting, but they're not allowed in higher education. And here's a brief video on explaining the difference between the two. As I pull it from over here again. Yes. Oh, okay. So sorry about that. Could anybody hear those? Oh, you guys have to tell me. I didn't know that. Okay, so let's see. I wonder if it's because I have my headphones in. Let me try. I'm going to start her talking, and I can see Jennifer right now on my screen. Tell me, can you hear? Can you hear that? Okay. I'll take this out.
Not anymore.
You said not anymore?
Yeah, I can't hear. The video's lagging, but I can't hear.
Let me see.
Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel.
So no one could hear that either? When she said, hi guys, welcome back to my channel?
I heard that.
You heard that? Okay.
Welcome. Today I'm doing something that I've wanted to do for a long time, which is to talk about the difference between modification and accommodation. In special ed, these terms are thrown around all the time, and I remember being in college and learning about them, but not really seeing them in action. To start off, usually people have some sort of curriculum that they use for their school, for general education. Because I'm talking to all of you guys, and we all probably have different types of curriculum for different things, I'm going to use a website that I love that provides a lot of supplemental types of activities for students. Super Teachers is phenomenal. I am not sponsored, I'm just a huge fan. This website does have a little bit of a membership fee, but it's like $20 for the whole year, and it's definitely great to supplement your lessons, to provide more work in case you need more morning work or homework or whatever. So just to make that clear, I'm going to use their resources to kind of demonstrate the differences between modifications and accommodations. Really quickly, what is the difference between a modification and an accommodation? If I were to put it really loosely, an accommodation is how, and a modification is what. An accommodation is how the student is learning the materials. A modification is what the student is expected to learn and what materials they're going to have. Tricky. So in special ed, we provide both. Sometimes a student might not need modifications, they might only need accommodations. And sometimes a student needs the whole gamut. They need as many things as you can give them. In an IEP, it depends on the state. Some states write them out, they list them out in one section. Other states have them embedded in the goals and in the benchmarks. A lot of times in a 504 plan, you really just need those for accommodations. Modifications are a change in the actual content of what the child is expected to know. All right, let's get into some examples. Let's say my third grade class is learning about common and proper nouns. 18 out of the 23 students are working on that level, that general education grade level, common and proper nouns. They're able to distinguish between the two. I have 7 students who are at different levels than the rest of the students. 2 of my students might just need an accommodation. They might have needed the list of words ahead of time the night before. They might need them in larger print versus smaller print. When we're doing an activity together, they might just need a few more verbal prompts and cues from me. That's it. And I also might have 3 students in my classroom that need it to be modified. They might actually need less work. So they're working just as hard on the problems that they have, but they might only need 5 problems versus 20. For some, I might actually cut that list of words they're getting tested in half. Instead of writing the words, they might just need different manipulatives or letter cards to spell out the words. While others are working on proper nouns, I might have a few that are just working on CVC words. They're still working hard. They're still learning new content. They're still within the parameters of grammar and understanding, but they're working on different types of words. And with that, I might also give them flashcards. We might be playing different games and activities related to those sight words. We might be spending more time, and instead of just learning to repeat the word, we're going to find other type of tactile, manipulative type of ways for them to remember, to sound it out. When it comes time to test these words, my accommodation folks might just need to go to a different corner. They might just do their work in a quieter place with headphones on, and they might need a bit more time. And we might be working on the same words for 4 weeks, while the rest of the peers are working on new words each week. All right, my second example. It's time to write some sort of personal narrative. And for my class of 25, 18 or 19 of them are going to use some type of graphic organizer to start them off. I'm going to explain the directions, and I'm just going to give them the graphic organizer, and they're going to take their time in planning out what they want to write. 2 or 3 of them might need an accommodation. They might need additional cues from me. They might just need a little bit more time. So giving them an extra 20, 30 minutes to work on it. I might also have a few students who can't even access this at all. And they might need a different type of graphic organizer. Instead of writing out their personal narratives, they might draw their personal narratives for me. They might tell me the story, and I might scribe for them. They might have a chance to type it up rather than writing it out. And when I get to the grading part of this, I might be grading others on a general rubric based on different elements and components. But for some of my students, I might just give them a check saying, "Good job, I loved how you did this." I might keep it as evidence so that as they get better and better at this, I can have an incredible amount of work to show their parents, to show the state, to show my principal how they've increased and how they're able to now write a couple words for a personal narrative versus just a few pictures. There are so many more accommodations and modifications. I'm only skimming the surface. I'm always coming up with new ideas and making more videos. So if there are things that you would love to see and you're really curious about and you want them to be in some type of visual format, please let me know. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much. And until next time, bye.
So, any comments about her suggestions, her definitions of about the difference between accommodations and modifications? Let me put my headphones back in, just in case I don't have them in, then it feels like I'm yelling. Any comments about the accommodations and modifications? And that was a great website. I mean, granted, there is a small fee. She talked about $20, but even if you go on Pinterest, I will mention this a lot. Pinterest has all kinds of great activities for everything. I love Pinterest just for the sake of building out my dream home and dream vacations, but it also has great information about just anything related to education. There's plenty of teachers out there. They're sharing their resources. As you work on your assignments, you may come across some activities there that will be great for your resource manual. So share and share alike. And if you come across something and you have not a team member, you have a classmate and you're like, oh, this could be helpful for this person. They're focusing on this topic. Feel free to share as well. That's what we do in education. We share, and share some more. So did anyone have any questions or comments about accommodations and modifications? No? It's the quietest class ever. And then there's assistive technology. Assistive technology I mentioned briefly last week, and it is a tool that is built into all of our technology as it is. You can find it in your phone, your laptop, your computers, regardless of the operating system. And when it comes to assistive technology, it is there to enhance the functional independence of that person who is using it. So if it's a person with low vision, or say for instance, I'm out and I have a Velma moment, Velma being from Scooby-Doo, and I've lost my glasses, which is something I struggle with in the morning looking for, not so much when I'm out and about. But just say for instance, things happen and I can't see, I could always turn on the screen reader feature of my phone, and then it can read everything for me, at least enough to get to be able to call my husband or do one of these numbers where it's like plastered to my eye. Whatever works, right? As long as I get my needs met. But assistive technology, like I said, the basics of it are available free in everyone's technology, the technology we already possess. And then there are things that are out there where the student, the school district, or maybe the principal or the parent may have to purchase something so that their child, their student, their client can get their needs met as well. So when it comes to instructional practices and who they benefit, all students could benefit from universal design, and there's a brief video about it here. It's a TED Talk actually. And then there's differentiated instruction. So when it comes to differentiated instruction, it is basically self-explanatory. You're taking what would be the normal lecture that I'm giving now, and then you start offering bits of the content in different ways. So there's videos. You may have students give a brief presentation on their experience of working with someone with assistive technology. So you look at instruction from a variety of ways, and then you implement it to hopefully tackle not just those who learn auditorily, but those who learn by doing, those who learn by seeing. You may have the kinesthetic learners, those who, like I said, learn by doing. And so you want to give those opportunities because it benefits all children. So if you have a child, a client, a student who does best by doing, incorporating centers or having activities is something that all students could benefit from. So instead of just sitting there and hearing the information constant, here's a picture, here's a video, it's like, here are some manipulatives. Now you're going to build out something that, incorporates assistive technology, or you're going to take this assignment and create it in a way that allows those who are hearing impaired to still benefit from it. So it gives you a chance, if you are the creative type or not, it gives you a chance to really lean into that and approach things from a different way. When it comes to differentiated instruction, it also includes assessment. So instead of handing students a piece of paper and saying, okay, answer these 10 questions in the next 10 minutes on chapter 1, it's like maybe it'll be an oral presentation. And it's like, okay, here are the concepts. Now explain to me, you will be assessed on how well you understand the photosynthesis process. So however the child chooses to do it, if they want to draw a picture of it and they draw the water cycle and everything, as long as they prove that they understand the concept of photosynthesis, then that would be an A assignment. They may want to stand up and just talk about it. Maybe writing is not their strong suit, or maybe they have a disability that impedes their ability to write or type. So then in that case, they would need to state, if that's something they're comfortable with, state how they could go about relaying that information to the teacher to prove that he or she understands that concept. So once again, teachers, professors will have that rubric there, and they're like, okay, well, the student hit on these things. Regardless if they drew a picture, they wrote an essay, they did it orally, they were able to show that they understand the concept. And these are ways that you can differentiate instruction. And it's something that can be done regardless of age. You don't have to wait till they get a certain age, and they don't have to necessarily have a disability. I have found that children are a lot more engaged the more you differentiate the instruction. Accommodations and modifications are the things that are available for students. And once you start getting into these two things, it's normally the student has a 504 or an IEP. You don't really hear about this unless they have one of the two on file. And then you have fewer and fewer students using assistive technology. But the thing about assistive technology is, as more students are growing up, especially this new generation that's just going into kindergarten and first grade, like all they know is technology. So they're getting that from the very, very beginning, and they're being taught how to lean into the screen reader. I mean, even my husband, who's older than me and not the most tech savvy, now uses a screen reader for his briefs for at work. So instead of someone sitting there reading, they have it running. They just go to Word and they hit dictate. Is it dictate or is it screen? I love how my brain goes blank. But basically, there's a feature in Word that is automatically there, and you can just turn it on, and it just starts reading everything that they have, all of their reports for them. And so, as people are coming in for their morning meetings, the computer is reading the briefing versus waiting until everyone sits down. Now we got to listen. It's like once you enter the room, mouths are closed, ears are open, and they're just listening to the briefing. And so that is an assistive technology piece that was put there for people who, need that feature. But now you're hearing more and more people just in general are using it. So any questions before you watch this video about universal design? Anything? Let me pull it from over here.
Everything you ever wanted to know about universal design for learning. Let's begin with the question of why should educators use a universal design for learning? The purpose of UDL is to provide all students, regardless of their background, with an equal opportunity to learn and succeed in the classroom. A UDL approach must serve the needs of each classroom's diverse group of learners, regardless of the student's cultural background, race, socioeconomic status, gender, language ability, reading, writing, or math proficiency, and even the student's motivation. This approach will empower both students and educators. Now, let's look at some specific benefits of UDL. First off, students are individuals, and some have specific barriers to learning. UDL curriculum designs aim to help students get around those barriers. Still, the approach incorporates assessments, lessons, and objectives that are both challenging and at the same time achievable for each student. This in turn will increase student engagement. Educators are empowered and able to enhance the curriculum for the benefit of their students. Enhanced curriculum includes new technology, exciting lessons, and added materials. Other than removing barriers, UDL should also build on student strength. Too often, educators spend all of their time focusing on deficiencies as opposed to accentuating student positives. On to the next section, which is the 3 guiding principles of UDL. The first principle is offering multiple ways to represent content. Besides just using a textbook, offer audio content, video to view, news articles, and more options. The second principle is to allow students to express their mastery of content. A teacher may allow some students to take a paper test, and other students can do an oral presentation. The third principle is providing various ways to motivate and engage students to learn. Consider game-based learning, gamification, culture studies, the language experience approach. Next, let's take a practical look at how to incorporate UDL in the classroom. Choice assignments are one staple of a UDL classroom. Not only do students feel a sense of autonomy, they feel more obligated to complete the assignment because they chose it. Next, teachers need a variety of materials on hand. For this reason, it's important to get department chairs and school principals on board to help secure supplies. Flexible assessment is another key component of UDL implementation. This goes back to building on student strengths and designing assessments based off of those strengths. Teachers should look to vary presentation of content. For example, not everyone has the attention for a lecture. There are many types of engaging videos on the internet as an alternative format. Also important is having supports in place for students. Identify students and their specific needs. Scaffold assignments and lessons. Teachers can be supported in many ways. Right now I'm going to take a quick break and ask that you hit that subscribe button. Also, I ask that you hit the thumbs up button and give this video a like as well. Now let's get back to it. Collaboration. The Inclusion Classroom is the most common place you would find implementation of universal design for learning. And that's because the collaboration can take place between the special education teacher and general education teacher. Collaboration of educators, teachers, administrators, and paraprofessionals should all be centered around shared goals and visions. Still, communication is what really drives collaboration. UDL requires open lines of communication between educators in a very professional way. The best thing to do is to create set times and places to meet and collaborate. It's easy to fall off with these set times and meetings. At these meetings, educators should work together on planning for UDL, implementing those plans, and eventually assessing the overall effects of the UDL approach. The next topic is lesson planning for the UDL. One way to get started is to create a class profile. Get an understanding of each student's strengths and weaknesses, their likes and dislikes, etc. and so forth. You don't want to plan a lesson without having a viable curriculum. Educators may have to audit the current curriculum and find out ways to improve the quality of that curriculum. Special education and general education teachers should work together to develop SMART goals for their students. SMART meaning specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Examining any UDL approach-centered lesson should have a lot of variety and different components. Lesson plans should not look the same day to day. After planning these wonderful UDL lessons, teachers need to take a look back and reflect on what worked and what did not work. And now the last section of this presentation, actual classroom examples of UDL at work. A UDL approach comes with a flexible learning environment where the teacher is always accessible. Students may be working alone or in groups, and they may be at the teacher's desk or designated areas or working independently. Lessons are multisensory in nature, meaning that they can incorporate music or visual graphics, video, or any other thing that you might like. Projects are an easy way to get new activities out for the students, and teachers can get really creative because there are so many projects out there. With these projects, there is always options to create groups. Teachers can go back to their classes, look at their student profiles, and figure out ways to design these groups. Because UDL has to meet the needs of so many, it should not rely heavily on teacher-driven lecture, but rather a student-centered approach to learning. Anyway, right now, I just want to say thank you for your time. Don't forget to check out the description link below for resources. Subscribe, like, and share this video, and I'll see you guys soon.
So these videos here are great as well for getting resources. So if you're looking for just information, I'm going to be sharing quite a few videos throughout this course related to special education and different aspects. And so feel free to go in and grab from these resources as well. So as you're building out, whether it be your resource manual, your research paper, or just your assignments, and you're like, well, I don't know where to start. Obviously there's so much information. Feel free to just go back and lean on the videos that I've already shared. And then like with this guy, he shared, he has his page. The young lady beforehand, she has her page that has a wealth of knowledge as well. So feel free to just start picking through there and seeing what you like or dislike. I think it would be really helpful, not only just because of the assignments in this class, but also we're in the midst of possibly doing a whole school year online. I mean, we don't really know where this is all going to land, but at least for this first quarter, for you guys, our first semester, we are completely online. So people are, I hate to say grasping at straws, but they're just kind of all over the place with finding the resources on how to truly meet the needs of all their students, not just those with disabilities, but all students online. So here's an opportunity to kind of be a part of that as well and jump in, and who knows, you may have someone in your class right now or in your center that is in need of some of these skills, and you can prove to be very, very helpful, not just for yourself, but for everyone else involved, especially the children. Let's see. So in my poking around, I accidentally got out of the slideshow. One of the downfalls of doing this live versus when it's already pre-recorded. So lastly, when it comes to chapter 2, this is the framework of support for students with IEPs. The goal is to always give them access to the core curriculum, which I went over briefly in the very beginning when I talked about the core curriculum and that social integration. The how, this is where after the parents and the teacher have established those goals and those objectives for the student, that's when they're going to start to lean into different ways to handle instruction, which accommodations to put in place, are adaptations / modifications really needed in order for the student to meet their goal. Assistive technology will come into place. There are great apps on the iPad and different types of tablets for students. I know of Proloquo, and my assumption is it's still available. It used to be a very, very expensive app, but in the meantime, it has gotten more affordable, at least from what I've been told. Plus, a lot of school districts have adopted it as well. So In the very, very beginning, school districts weren't giving out iPads as an accommodation, but near the end of my son's high school career, his traditional high school career, I should say, they started, if you really, as a parent, really, really fought for it, or if the child truly, truly had a need for it, they were giving iPads with all of these great apps available on them as accommodations. And it was a part of their IEP, so it was incorporated into everything that they did. And we had a neighbor when we lived in military housing who used the iPad as his sole communication device. And so he wore it as a crossbody. He wore it like a crossbody, I should say. And he knew how to go in and type in using the pictures, because he had the picture exchange communication system, which means PECS, P-E-C-S, another acronym. And this young man would just use it. You know, he would be out riding his bike and he would stop and, you know, flip open his iPad and communicate with me completely through his iPad. And his hearing was fine. His understanding was great, but his expressive communication was severely delayed. So it was just easier for him. And so as he got more and more comfortable with communicating using his iPad, his mom shared that his behavior started to become less and less frequent. His behavior episodes, outbursts, meltdowns became less and less because he was getting one of his basic needs met, which was communication. As long as you're being heard and understood, people tend to not have behaviors because they're being heard and understood, you know. So that is the end of chapter, I'm going to say chapter 1, wrong, chapter 2. Basically, the summary is it had pivotal court cases that led to changes in special education in the way students were screened and assessed. IEP should address academics, of course, and their socialization needs, because as humans, we thrive off of socialization. Accommodations are not the same as modifications, and the young lady, I believe, did a great job in explaining the difference and giving some examples. Both are allowed in K through 12. In K through 12, it runs the gamut. I mean, basically, if a school or a school district can implement it, they have the resources for it, and there's a true disability-related need for it, then they're going to get it. I throw in about only accommodations are available in higher ed and employment, just in case if, you know, you end up working with someone who has a disability and they are in higher ed, or you're working with someone as a job coach, or you're trying to provide job coaching to someone, modifications are not allowed in employment arena. So if you work at Target and you have someone who has an accommodation, someone who has a severe disability and they work at Target, say for instance, front-facing products, which is a job that is given in CVS, but I'm going to use Target as an example because I was there today. And if the person's job is to, make sure everything in cosmetics is front-facing, then that's what they have to do. They can't turn around and say, well, no, only, the products on the top 2 shelves, because the student or maybe the client can't stoop down for whatever reason based off of their disability. Well, in that case, that would be a modification, because if the job requires that they handle all of the front facing of products in the cosmetics section, then the expectation is that the student will, the worker will front face all those products. So that's something to take into consideration as well. UDL is the ideal education approach. And I say ideal because it does require more effort, more thought, and in some cases more resources, which means for higher ups, it means more money, but it benefits everyone. So if, students can be in a situation where UDL is being practiced and being implemented, it's going to benefit everyone involved, not just the person with a disability. And then lastly, IEPs address the entire student's development. You're going to take it all into consideration. You're taking into effect how it feels for the student when he or she has to step out, if they need to take their tests, in the guidance office. You're taking all of this into effect, and not just looking at them as just this one thing that's quote unquote wrong with them. And it includes a variety of resources. You want it to have differentiation and instruction, assistive technology if that's needed, and additional therapies. And those additional therapies are not necessarily the medical ones, although they're medically based. But that could be the speech pathologist for the school. It could be the occupational therapist who's working on the student with maybe fine motor skills, like gripping a pencil. So whereas it is medical based, they're not necessarily coming in to be the speech therapist or be the occupational therapist. They're coming in to supplement what has already been proven that there's a need for. And in some cases, or at least in my case, we brought in more documentation from our son's actual speech pathologist and speech therapist and occupational therapist, because we wanted the school speech pathologist and school occupational therapist to have something more to go on, just to kind of make their assessment more robust. And hopefully the goal was also so that they have a better understanding of exactly what Caleb's needs are. And that's chapter 2. Yay. Yes.
Sorry, it's me again.
No worries.
I did have a quick question about like clarification of accommodations and modifications
Mm-hmm.
based on the video.
Yeah.
So from the examples that she gave in the video, were her modifications when she reduced the size of the words to like 5 down to 10 or 5 for the student, and then her accommodations were having them draw out the answer instead of writing it out or saying it verbally to them?
Yes.
To her? Okay.
Yeah. Because the content or what is being expected from the student didn't change, but when she like took the piece of paper and cut it in half and said, okay, now the student only has to do this half, so now the rest of the peers have to do the entire worksheet, that particular student only has to do half. So there was a change in the actual content because, yeah. But you're correct in your understanding. Yeah, no worries. Any other questions about chapter 2? Should we go straight into chapter 3? One of the things that we do, and I'm going to try hard not to say pre-COVID, but pre-COVID, I would always offer the students a break. We can still do that too. I mean, yeah, we're sitting here, looking at each other, or not in some cases, but it's an option. Does anyone feel like they need a break? We've been doing this now, an hour? Anyone feel like they need a break? They're like, no, Nicole, just keep going. We have the rest of the day, the night. Yes, we can hear you now. Who's this talking? Oh, I'm sorry. It does seem like you're a little like in and out though. Oh, okay. Are you gonna type it out in the chat room? Oh, okay. So sorry about that. This is the first time I'm hearing your voice, Patty. Unless someone else heard it and I just didn't. Is that yay? Yay? No? Seems like everybody is paused right now. Wait, can everyone hear me, see me? Everybody on my end is paused. Now I got kicked out. Okay, for yes, I'm coming. I know, I don't know, but yeah. Welcome to, let's see, now I can't seem to get this to come up to where I can see the video. Love it so much. And here, and here, and my life. Let's go with this, and here, and I'm back. This is what happens when I try to do things live. Okay. Now we're back. We're going to just jump straight into it before my internet decides it doesn't want to behave anymore. So chapter 3, risk factors in early intervention. Let's go. I didn't ask it to be on the draw screen. Me, and me. So how's everyone else doing as I try to get this to work and do away with the draw screen? That's not what I wanted. Happy birthday, Gabby. Let's all sing happy birthday, Gabby. My birthday was last Friday, but let's focus on Gabby. But you're a Virgo, so yay. So everyone sing happy birthday to Gabby.
Okay. Happy birthday. Thank you. Happy birthday, Gabby. Happy birthday, Gabby.
Do you have plans?
Yeah, I have family coming at like 8:45.
Oh,
Yeah.
this evening?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I told them I had class, so we're gonna come after class.
okay, well, great. There's the incentive. We have to keep pushing along so Gabby can get to her party. Okay, so chapter 3, key terms and definitions. We have risk factors. It's very self-explanatory. These are just a wide variety of things that are available or are available in the natural environment or biologically that can impact a person's cognition, social development, emotional development, and or cause some type of hindrance in their physical development. And then you have the different early intervention things that are available to them. And these are just a set of services. Once again, in special education, a lot of the terms that you're going to come across are very self-explanatory. So we've already come across quite a few. And then with early intervention, you can assume these are things that the child will engage in at their very early ages of life, usually from birth to about 3 or 4, definitely before they go into the education system, starting kindergarten. And so they're just the services that are available. There's the regional center that has a great program called, I love it. I was going to say Head Start, but it's not called Head Start. But they have the Parent Ballard Center in Old Town that has amazing resources for the amazing early intervention resources. So it's the Harold Ballard, Ballard, Parent Center in Old Town. And when I used to be involved with the Autism Society of San Diego, like more frequently, we would sometimes hold, once a week, we would host, and they have their own programs as well, but we would host these programs that were geared just to those who were just getting the diagnosis of autism for their child. And so they were going through all of that like pre-information, talking about regional center, the ARC, getting enrolled in different types of parent support group meetings, because you want to basically overload the parent in the beginning, and it's on purpose because there's so much information to learn, and you want the child to be want the child as soon as possible to start taking advantage of these resources, and you want the parents to start feeling supported as well. So the Ballard Center is a great resource as well, and it covers all disabilities. So regardless of which topic that you've chosen for your manual, it's possibly a good one. Major environmental risk factors. So you have the things that we're kind of already aware of, like radiation. Excuse me, when you go to the doctor and you have to get x-rays, they have you put on the heavy lead vest because they don't want you to be exposed to radiation. They always ask if you're pregnant because exposure to radiation could severely impact your unborn child. There's neurotoxins that are available. Sometimes they're available in food and water. They talk about it being in hand sanitizer, certain hand sanitizer, things of that nature. And these are things that you're not supposed to take into your body anyway, but these are things that if someone happens to encounter them, it could impact their child's development. Then you have the things that happen that can be risk factors in the environment once the child has been born. Now this could be lead, and unfortunately you can still be exposed to that in old buildings. It can be in old paint, or just be in paint that was there when they first built the school. And then if it's an old building, children are children, they're not always careful. They may touch it and put it in their mouth, they may lick it, they're just being kids, but it's a possibility that it could impact their development because even though they're, obviously they may look like they don't have anything going on, they're still developing. And so things that they're coming in contact with in the environment can impact that. Then there's other environmental toxins that are out there, things in the water, just things in the air. Poverty can have an impact on their in development as well because of poverty usually means that they have a lack of resources due to the lack of income. They may not have easy access to health care, and if they do, they may not be able to go on a more regular basis. And so then the impact of the disability could have an even higher impact on their development, depending on what it is. Child maltreatment, this could be, once again, self-explanatory. Abuse, whether it be emotional or physical, withholding of food, things, it may not even be withholding. They may not just have access to food on a regular basis. And if a child's basic needs aren't being met, it's going to impact the way they learn, and their focus at school is not going to be on what's being presented by the teacher. No matter how accommodating it is, it's going to be on the fact that they didn't have their basic need met, which in this case was food. And if you're hungry, it's going to impact the way your quality of sleep. And so it just goes on and on and on. Accidents, unfortunately, can lead to different things that can affect development. In past years, there's been a lot of talk about concussions in high schoolers and even middle schoolers as well, and how that impacts their brain development. CET, which is, I love it, cerebral. They talk about it a lot. It may not be cerebral, it may be concussion. But anyway, it's a huge topic now amongst the football players. And it talked about the even the development, the remodification of helmets so that you can better cushion the brain, so that way when they are hit, it hopefully lessens the impact of the hit on the brain. But repeated hits can still impact their cognition, their understanding. In some cases, it's leading to deterioration of parts of the brain, which of course, affects their language, their cognition, their ability to self-regulate when it comes to their emotions. And then you have school factors. The main one that we usually discuss is bullying, because it is something that a child will not normally experience. Wait, somebody had a question or no? Oh, sorry. School factors like bullying. Because granted, it's not something that a child would normally experience at home, but when they get out in the school system, or just in the community, if they have a disability, they tend to be a little more susceptible to being bullied if they don't have their own words and their own voice yet on how to address that when someone, is mean to them. Or even how to just speak up to a teacher or a principal if someone picks on them. So any questions about environmental factors? So there's different strategies for the prevention of disability, and I don't particularly like the word prevention because sometimes things are just what they are. This week, everyone is engaging in a debate around immunization. whether or not you're pro or con, and then you're going to flip it and then, end with the last comment about whether or not your opinion has changed. There's genetic counseling for people who are interested in finding out, like, okay, I'm married to John. I have these things in my family. John has these things in his family. What is the likelihood of our child also having these things? If we have the recessive gene of a particular disability, is it, if we both have the recessive gene, what's the probability of our child having the dominant gene and it being expressed? What would that look like for their quality of life? And these are just things that people sometimes will look into. I haven't known of anyone really engaging in genetic counseling simply because it's so expensive. And I think for the most part, people try to have open and honest conversations about, okay, what runs in your family? This is what runs in my family, because that's one way to look at it. But at the same time, some people just don't know the disabilities, disorders, things that run in their family. So they just don't know. And you kind of run the gamut and you just, you see what happens. Early prenatal care is a great way to go about just helping make sure that your child is getting all the care that they need, all the vitamins they need. When you're pregnant, you have to take in a lot more calories and vitamins, and there's a ton of appointments just to make sure not only that you're carrying the baby properly, but so the baby is also developing properly. There's prenatal testing available, like amniocentesis, where they take the very long syringe and they pull out a portion of the amniotic fluid to test for the trisomy gene, which is what is used to detect Down syndrome. And that's something that's kind of standard, I believe. And then there's early intervention. So in some cases, depending on the severity of the disability, children who engage in early intervention strategies and techniques have had their disability impact them even less once they got into kindergarten and first grade. So it isn't so much that they outgrew the disability. Sometimes, you may hear people say, oh, my child outgrew whatever. It isn't so much that they outgrew, they found strategies and they put things in place that helped them overcome it or compensate for it, and the child was able to move forward. But it's something that has to always be monitored, because obviously different schools, different teachers, different settings, the child is going to change, obviously, through puberty and everything else. So as the demands change around the child and the child continues to change, it's still something that has to be monitored just to make sure it doesn't come up again. Any questions about strategies for early intervention? Let's see. Okay, so in order to be eligible for early intervention, the child has to be between the ages of birth and 3, obviously just been born, and 3. The child has to have a developmental delay, meaning, and you may hear people talk about the milestones. You take your child, or a child may go to the doctor and they'll talk about, oh, by this milestone, child should be doing this, should be crawling. By this age, they should be speaking. By this age, they should be saying so many sentences, things of that nature. And so there's always some flexibility in, it isn't like, okay, as soon as they turn 2, they should be doing these things. It's like a range, maybe 3 to 6 months. After about 6 months, you're going to be like, maybe we need to really look a little deeper into what's going on, what's causing the delay. Usually, not usually, but sometimes children who are the firstborn, because they're growing up and they're hearing so many adults talking about them, they tend to pick up speech faster. But then there are cases where they don't pick up speech as fast because there's somebody always doing something for them. Some cases, they have proven that the second and third born pick up speech a lot faster because they have a sibling who's always around and they're just hearing it constant. So it's just more natural for them to, because they're hearing it more people are engaging with the baby, they tend to pick up on it faster. Children with a physical or mental condition that carries a high probability of developmental delay, that's one way people can go about identifying if they need to engage in early intervention services. And then if you have a child who is already at risk for a developmental delay due to something that has happened to them medically or something in the environment, and if the doctors deem that if they do not engage in early intervention now, they will have even a higher risk of their the medical conditioning being worse, would be an opportunity for early intervention skills to take place as well. So we're going to watch a brief video on early signs as I grab this and pull it over here and take out my headphone.
In the U.S., nearly 17% of all children experience some form of developmental delay, disability, or behavioral concern. Recognizing a problem early and seeking early intervention is key for parents, caregivers, and healthcare providers. To help children with potential problems reach a healthier future, Quality Life Concepts realizes the impact of early intervention to support children with developmental needs and their families within their home and communities. Quality Life Concepts is an early intervention service provider serving children and families in 9 counties in central Montana that include Cascade, Toole, Glacier, Pend Oreille, Choteau, Hill,
So yeah,
Liberty,
obviously these
Teton, and Plain counties.
this resource
They can be
isn't
reached
available
by
to Californians, but the information
761-2680. Our program aims to help parents measure their child's progress in terms of milestones of how children grow and learn. Parents can gauge how their child develops by how they play, learn, speak, and act. All children develop at their own pace and may reach particular milestones slightly late or early. The age a child takes a first step, smiles for the first time, and waves bye-bye offers important clues. A delay occurs when a child reaches a milestone at an age later than the average developmental rate. In the first 4 months, babies become more interactive, have good head control, and begin reaching and rolling to get toys. By 8 months old, a majority of children turn their heads upon hearing their name, smile back when someone smiles at them, and crawl forward on their bellies. Between 12 and 18 months, children cruise around furniture, squat to pick up toys, and begin moving independently in their own environments. Eighteen-month-old children can engage in simple pretend play, point to an interesting object, and speak in single words without prompting. They walk well enough to move around safely, feed themselves, and drink from a cup independently. By their second birthday, many children speak in 2 to 4 word phrases, walk up steps alternating feet, follow simple instructions, and point to objects and pictures when named. As they turn age 3, children are eager to play with peers and spend more time in group play.
Right here, maybe. Nope. Maybe you go right there.
And I want to pause it there just to mention, because they mentioned the age 3, if a child is having any, if a child's doctors or parents are having any concerns around autism spectrum disorders, this is around that age frame when you're going to start to see it, because they're not going to want to engage with their peers, and you're going to start to possibly see behaviors around taking turns, which is also natural for a toddler, but it'll be a little more on the extreme side because they're not going to want to necessarily naturally want to engage with others.
It looks like we are on like this.
Oh, good job.
Keeping track of how they play, learn, speak, and act is really important. Those are the things that parents, grandparents, and caregivers can do to learn those early signs of child development. Follow your gut. You're the expert about your baby, and you can make the difference by contacting Quality Life Concepts for a free confidential developmental assessment. This parent acted early.
With Kason, when he was born, I knew that something was wrong. As he was developing, I knew that he wasn't developing and meeting his milestones properly. He wasn't sitting up on time or rolling over. So as a mother, I was concerned when I compared him to my other children.
The good news is that the earlier parents and providers recognize children that are delayed in reaching a milestone, the more intervention may help them reach their full potential. To detect a problem early, connect early with your child and observe how they play, learn, speak, and act.
If you have any concerns with your child's development, there are a number of things you can do. First, contact your child's pediatrician. Then contact Quality Life Concepts if your child is under the age of 3. If they're over the age of 3, call your local school district. Follow your gut. You know your child best, and you can make a difference by calling Quality Life Concepts.
Most of the time, a developmental problem is not something that children will grow out of on their own. But with help, these children can reach their full potential. If you suspect a problem, act early. If you become worried that your child does not play, learn, speak, or act like other children his or her age, contact Quality Life Concepts.
So instead of Quality Life Concepts, you can contact the Regional Center because they address, regional centers are set up all throughout California. There are some, there's multiple in San Diego County as it is because it's such a huge county. There's the East County, there is one for South County, there's one for Central, and there's a couple for North County because it's so huge as well. And this runs throughout all of California, and they will address anytime from birth to, I want to say 15, because once they enter into the 16, 17-year-old age range, it's really rare for a regional center client to start that later on in their development, because normally if they've had some type of delay, some type of disability that's truly impacting their world, it's going to show up in the very, very beginning. However, accidents happen. So there could be a case where 14, 15, 16-year-old, I mean, anything can happen from car accident to, something sport related. And then all of a sudden now they need state services. And from the regional center, because they cover 0, birth to 99. But as far as in that sweet spot of getting a lot of those services like respite, which is basically babysitting, and other resources that are available, they're going to be geared towards that age range. And then as they get older, they get a different case manager that's going to focus on career, job coaching, maybe group or residential care treatment placement, things of that nature. So it gets a little bit trickier, but there's other things that are still available. Like another resource that's available for all individuals with disabilities is the Department of Vocational Rehab. And so if you have someone, regardless of their disability, and they're looking for job coaching or they're looking for resources that can help them with career placement, what if maybe they want to be a mechanic and they want to go to, I'm going to make myself sound really crazy. Mechanic school, is that a thing? If they want to go and learn about if they just want to go, and I know, okay, here it is. Cuyamaca, I know, has an automotive program. There it is, an automotive program. So does Southwestern, because I've taught out there on campus, and I've seen, I haven't gone in it, obviously, but I've seen the garage with it. But say, for instance, you have a child, say, for instance, my kid wanted to learn how to do it. He could go through the Department of Rehab, and they would assign him an aide. And we do have someone on campus right now who has an aide from the Department of Rehab. And so they're with him, they would be with my son, and they would sit in class with them, help him with notes, make sure, his behaviors remain appropriate, whatever it is that the student needs. They can sit in on these college courses with them, or the tech school courses, wherever they choose to go, and they can help them with learning that information. Now, they can't go in and help them take the test to get the certification and, to do the things, but they can help them with being in the school, getting the education that they need, as well as in applying for jobs, can even act as a job coach. And so they have certain places like Petco was doing it. Of course, this is all pre-COVID, but Petco, many of the libraries, why is my head just all over the place? Bonds, they have different programs that are available. And you may have been in some of these stores and seen people with disabilities engaging and doing things just like everyone else. But you may also see someone else kind of standing off to the side and just watching them, and not watching them, but just kind of monitoring, making sure they're staying on task and doing the things they need to do. Pre-COVID, my son had 2 jobs. One was at Round Table out there in El Cajon, and then the other one was at Rancho Valhalla Nursery, which is like plants and stuff. So he was out there planting things, moving rocks. I mean, he was out in the environment at a garden center. At Round Table, he was responsible for bussing the tables, filling up the condiment shakers, ice machine. I mean, things that most people, I guess, didn't really want to do, but he enjoyed it, and he enjoyed it well. And he had a job coach there as well. So it gives them an opportunity to engage in things that their peers are doing, and it's appropriate. So any questions about early interventions and how that all helps? Let's see. So for tonight's video, it's going to be, it looks like 2 because mine clicked out. Let's see, to go on, because Gabby has a party to get to, and we want to make sure she is on time for that. And it's a party. The elements of early intervention, you always want them to be family focused. Even with our son, even now, it's important for the family to be involved. Like I said in the beginning last week, sometimes families aren't involved either because it's just their choice. Maybe they're already overwhelmed and they can't handle one more thing. But it's very helpful when the family is involved, because you want whatever the doctors and therapists are saying, you want to be able to implement it, and the teachers, you want to be able to implement it at home so the child gets like double and triple dose of the same information, in hopes that it will, in my eyes, it was always in hope that it would speed up the progress, but at least he or she is hearing the same thing over and over again. It's always individualized. You can take things from that have worked for other children, but you have to always take into consideration it may not work for your client, for your student, for your child. Interdisciplinary, you want it to be something that is generalized, and so that way the child doesn't think that, oh, I'm only engaging in this strategy because I'm at school. I'm in Miss Patterson's class, so this is where I do this. It's like, no, we have generalized this. You're going to do this whether you're in Mr. Brown's class or Miss Jackson's class. Across the board, you're going to do it at home. You're going to do it on the bus. You're going to do it in the community, because we're all speaking the same language. Collaborative, I was always that person who communicated all the changes, and whether it was Caleb's IEP or his needs, if it was medication changes that impacted his behavior, I was that point person, because I chose to be, to make sure that what his psychiatrist said was related to his teacher, was related to his ABA therapist. I mean, you want everyone talking, and very rarely can you bring everyone to the table because we all have different insane schedules. But if you've got that one point person, it helps the situation out so much better, especially for the child. You want to provide these things in natural environments such as the home, simply because you're more relaxed at home. I have found working from home has helped with my stress levels greatly, mainly because I can focus on just work, and there's not all these other distractions. Plus, people are usually just more relaxed at home. And with, especially with Regional Center and other community organizations, you're going to always have an individualized family service plan, and this is going to look similar to an IEP, but instead of it being focused just on the student like an IEP is, the IFSP focuses on the family. So in Regional Center, everyone gets the clients, that is, they always get an IFSP, and in it are parent goals. And if Caleb had siblings, there would have been sibling goals as well, that basically says that okay, yes, regional center is going to do this. We're going to provide these resources. We're going to give you respite so that you, have a break. We're going to let you know about the YMCA, which is another good resource for individuals with disabilities because of their model of approaching all individuals with disabilities. And they also have programs available as well. You want to make sure everyone is playing a role. So that way when they have those quarter reports, like they do in an IEP and for the IFSP, you know exactly what everyone's doing. And everyone is doing their part because everyone plays a role in that child's effective development. So to wrap this chapter up, a child's environment and pre and postnatal care impact their development, which kind of goes without saying. There are 5 disability prevention strategies parents can consider, and that's where I mentioned genetic counseling. Some people, in immunization, and they have lots of thoughts about that. Prenatal care, and so on and so forth, and then early intervention strategies directly impact the impact. Well, duh, directly impact this. The severity of the disability and how it goes about playing out the child's further development. Now, granted, some intervention strategies may not work at all, so that's why you have to constantly keep tweaking it, researching different ways, communicating with the child if they have the language to communicate back with you, to figure out what works. And then you just kind of go from there. And that is chapter 3. Any questions about chapter 3? At all, please? Is anyone else attending Gabby's party, or is it just Gabby? Everybody's like, get off so we can all attend the party. Let's see. I need to get out of. Here we go. So I promise we'll be done by 8:30 because I want her to have fun, and I also want to give everyone a chance to jump back into the other things that are due this week without it feeling too much. I need to move everyone out of my way over here and then grab chapter 4. Chapter 4 is very straightforward because we're just talking about families and family units. And today is just not my day for technology because I'm just trying to move the Zoom screen out of my way now. It's going to be interesting to see if everybody's faces pops up in the video. Okay, so families of children with disabilities. So in the last chapter, we discussed briefly poverty and the different ways it can impact just life in general. So we're not necessarily talking about disability, but how poverty plays a role in our 5 life domains, which are health, productivity, physical environment, emotional well-being, and family interaction. So I'm pretty sure whatever the number, the socioeconomic status for that poverty line here in California is, you've got to take into consideration how that is impacting the children. So when you look at the amount of money that goes into what is considered the poverty line, and then you look at everything else that goes into a child's home, it will directly impact their health, which is, how hungry they are, if it's proper nutrition. The undernutrition during pregnancy can, my gosh, it kicked me out again. I hate it so much. So I have learned from doing this live that this is not the best way to approach this class because I keep getting kicked out. So going forward, starting next week, I'm gonna go back to my original way of approaching this, where it's already recorded and we just watch snippets, because doing it live is not the answer. Okay, so quickly, before it decides it doesn't want to let me be great, we talked about the different domains that impact poverty. Productivity, of course, if a person's basic needs aren't being met, meaning their nutrition and their sleep, It's going to impact the way they function when they are awake, and they may have delayed cognitive development, which means their understanding may be delayed. And it may not even have to do with disability. It could just be the fact that they're hungry and they haven't had proper sleep. So their brains are not going to function at the same level that it needs to, which can lead to underachievement. Limited access to leisure, you can put /sleep in there. Physical environment can impact it as well, whether it be the home needs repair, it might have too many people in it. You see the mention of lead here. There's the neighborhood concerns. It could be a safety thing. Once again, that could impact their quality of sleep. And not feeling safe has an effect on a person's emotional well-being, which leads into increased stress, possibly low self-esteem if it's bullying or something is going on, or if they just don't feel good about who they are. That can lead to low self-esteem as well. Family interactions, is it inconsistent, unresponsive parenting? Are both parents involved? It could be very well that both parents are in the home, but one may not be involved, or it may be that both parents don't know what to do. So there isn't a lot of conversation and support when it comes to meeting that student's developmental need. Marital conflicts over money, increased sibling responsibilities. These are all the things that can weigh very heavily on a child when they have a disability, or just children in general. The characteristics of the child's disability can impact the family's reaction as well, the nature and degree and demands. ADHD is like the #1 diagnosed disorder among children. Depending on the severity of that disorder on the child, it may be one thing where the parents say, okay, we just need to allot more time to give Timmy an opportunity, to kind of sort through their thoughts before speaking. It could be something that's simple as that, or it might be something that's even more planned out, meaning, okay, yes, we're going to attend church on Sunday, but we know Timmy can't sit that long, so we need to see about maybe placing him in children's church, or maybe we need to sit near the back of the church so that once he gets a little antsy, we can step out. So depending on the severity of the disability will depend on how the family reacts to the child who has a disability. Other characteristics that play a role as well as the size of the family, how many children, are both parents involved, the socioeconomic status, which I brought up in the very beginning. Cultural backgrounds is brought up as well because different cultures have different attitudes towards disabilities as a whole. Religious beliefs are also things to take into consideration as well. And with San Diego being such a diverse county, which I absolutely love, as educators, as caregivers, as child care providers, we have to take all of these things into consideration because everyone looks at it differently. And whereas I'm very open about talking about my son's disability and the things that we did that worked and didn't work, our challenges, everyone in the African American community is not as open. And so just because I'm an open book, it should not be assumed that you can sit down with anyone else who's also Black and say, well, tell me about how, raising a child with cerebral palsy impacted your life. They may become very, very closed off and defensive. And whereas I'm not. So you have to always use your own emotional intelligence to gauge whether or not this would be a good idea to just start talking to people about how their child's disability impacted their family and or themselves as a mother or a father. When you have your supports within your family, you have formal supports, which are kind of self-explanatory because these are the professional people. These are the teachers, the doctors, the therapists, things of that nature. And so then you have your natural or informal support. And so these are the people that the child is interacting with and the family is interacting with naturally. So they could be neighbors, people in the church, other family members who don't live with the family. It could be their friends as well. And so these are the people who just provide support and the sense of just being there for them. So they're not necessarily coming in and saying, I'm going to provide therapy for Timmy today. It's like, no, they're just there as a friend. They're just there to love them as they are. You have different supports that also include, like I said, you have the church, temples, counselors, therapists, other parents of children with disabilities, known as parent-parent support, which I have found to be very helpful for me. I got that through the Autism Society of San Diego, and I leaned on and continue to lean on other women who have raised particularly boys with autism, because that was where I needed to focus on. I had one child. He is a boy. He is on the spectrum. So I was very intentional about who I asked to be my parent mentor, because I wanted to hear from people who had already raised boys, who had autism similar to the way it was on my child. So that way I can turn around and say, well, what do I do when they're entering puberty and it's like all over the place? It was just me and my sister growing up. So I didn't know anything about what boys were like during puberty. Just know that, oh my gosh, they're just like a totally different animal than they are with girls. And I know we have our things that we go through, but boys are just boys, and I'll just leave it at that. But parent-to-parent support is very, very helpful. It was very helpful for me. I have found other parents to find it very helpful too, if you find the right parent group. I never attended parent groups as a whole, like as a support group, mainly because I found that one person or those two people who had already gone through it, and then there was one parent who was going through it at the same time as me, and we became like this little trio, and we would text and call each other in the middle of the night, like in the middle of the night, like, oh my gosh, he just did this. Oh my gosh, my son just did that. I don't know. And then the mom who had already gone through it before would be like, oh yeah, this is what this is. And what really helped with the mom that we chose, she's also a nurse, so she could give us that medical background as well as that parent background. So that was really helpful for me. So it wasn't all, at least I'm coming to the table with all this emotion. She was responding with the emotion of understanding, but also layering on that medical side to say, okay, this is what's really going on, and how boys have technically 2 puberty stages, whereas in girls have 1. And I was just like, no, we can't do this again. But we did it again because, boys they go through 2 stages of puberty, which is obviously not fair to them, but not fair to me as well as a parent. So then you have respite care, which I've mentioned a few times. Respite is something, it basically means rest. It is something that is a resource that is offered through the YMCA. It's offered through the regional center as well. And depending on the severity of the child's disability, regional center will allot a certain amount of hours. So for my son, he got 16 hours a month that we got for respite. So 16 hours a month pretty much factored out to 4 hours a week that we used for respite care. And so someone would show up, and for 4 hours, at least for me at the time, all I wanted to do was be able to go to Target and to Chili's and just enjoy myself at Target and at Chili's. And that's what I did with my respite care. Sometimes parents would like push it all together and have 8 hours, and then they would take the whole day, and it would just be, off doing whatever it is they want to do. There were parents who all they did was sleep during respite, because at least they knew, depending on how many hours they got, they would be able to get, somebody else was monitoring their child with a disability, and for those 4 or 5 hours, however many hours they're choosing to use or have been given, that's what they do to take care of themselves. So it's self-care, and you're getting paid for self-care. And when I say you're getting paid, the person who is actually the respite worker is getting paid, but the parent or the caregiver is also highly appreciative of it, because you're able to just rest. Let's see. Under IDEA, so you have your parents' rights. They have the right to be informed. They have the right to consent. They have the right to participate in placement and program decisions, and they have the right for due process. So that can also lead to mediation if you're not happy with the conclusion that the school has come up with regarding your child's education plan. You can take the school to mediation, and then basically mediation is the same thing it means regardless if you're talking about special education or not. You're basically trying to come to some common ground. The school is saying one thing, you're feeling like it should be something else. So now we're going to all come together and come to hopefully a common ground. And as I've shared before, parents also have the right to not participate in their child's education plan if they so deem necessary. I brought up this video here about cultural competence, but when I post it, I'm going to allow you to go in and check that out on your own. But it's really important, especially in this day and age, to take a child's background, their cultural background, into consideration, and also understanding that you may have certain assumptions and biases that you're really truly not aware of, but it may be projected on that different culture. So it's important to identify what those cultural values are as a whole, but then also get to know the family. Find out what's important to them when it comes to their child's needs truly being assessed and met in the classroom, because you don't want to come off too pushy, and at the same time you don't want them to feel like you're not giving enough. So you kind of make them aware of everything that's available, and then you want it to be a reciprocal conversation. So you're saying, if you were to say, okay, these resources are available for Timmy, and if you're talking to the parent, with your support, I would like to implement these things here as well as at home, because as I've shared, it's important to have buy-in from the parent and the child, because these are the two parties that are going to be not just only implementing what you're doing in the classroom or doing in the childcare setting, at work. You're hoping that they will implement the same things at home. So that way the child benefits not only when they're in the classroom, but also when they're at home. So any questions about that as we come almost to the close? So there's plenty of positive aspects of having children with disabilities in your family. I know sometimes it can be easy to focus on, oh, my child can't do this, or that child can't do that, or that poor family is unable to do these things. But all children with disabilities or not, they contribute a variety of things to the family. They can be a source of joy. If you, as a parent, as a caregiver, take a step back and look at the child as they are, there are aspects there. I believe it without even having to prove it with research. There's always some good in someone. Everyone brings something of value to the table. It's just a matter of finding out what that is. And that takes time and effort from the teacher, from the caregiver, and understanding it, but they bring something to the table. And as we sit in these roles, our job is to find out what that is so that we can use that to help them continue to get where they want to be education-wise. They provide a means of learning life's lessons. If anything, it causes you to step out the box and be creative and look at things from a different approach. It may cause you to stretch in areas that you haven't stretched before, so you're expanding your knowledge. It'll give you they also give and receive love. Everyone is deserving of it. And I kind of feel like once, and I've read it in your papers as well, once people get a better understanding of the disability of the person, their guard tends to come down, and that natural relationship tends to evolve if both parties are willing. They supply a sense of blessing or fulfillment, contribute a sense of pride. Of course, this is what you pour into them. They're willing to boost it up and show it as well, but they just have to be given that opportunity, and they have to feel comfortable, because children are very, very sensitive to environments that are welcoming to them, as well as in people. And it can strengthen the family. In my family, we're strong advocates. We don't tolerate people making fun of other people who are different. We never did, even before Caleb came along. And so it was just one of those things like, okay, you're different, but you're not less than. And so we will tweak and do whatever we have to do on our end just to make sure, you get your needs met, and we just keep moving forward, because that's what you're supposed to do. So the wrap up is, poverty impacts individuals' health, productivity, physical environment, emotional well-being, family interactions. Families' reaction impacted by disability and family characteristics. So this is how the family reacts to the disability. Family supports can be formal or informal. Parents have rights under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And as I've said before, and even last week, they have the right to not participate. It is not mandatory, and then there's no consequence if they don't. They're just at the mercy of whatever the school district decides for the child. You have to consider culture prior to initially communicating with the family, because you don't want to turn them off initially, because if you do that, first impressions are lasting. And if I know I've been in situations where I have been turned off by people approaching me differently, thinking I didn't know anything about autism. And it's like, ladies and gentlemen, I write his IEPs. I've been doing it ever since he was in 5th grade. Like, don't talk to me like I'm 5. But if you take that into consideration, or get an understanding of where the parent or the family is coming from, it can save you a lot of heartache in trying to rebuild a relationship that, that was accidentally tarnished from the very beginning. Identify your assumptions, quality check them to reality, and that could be basically asking someone else. If you're getting Timmy and you're his 5th grade teacher, and say Miss Johnson had him for 4th grade, you may have your, like, yes, I understand autism, but I also understand autism looks different on every single child. So it would benefit me as his 5th grade teacher to go and talk to Miss Johnson and say, hey, can you just give me some insight about Timmy? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? How involved are the parents? Are they people who truly understand everything that's going on? Are they parents who look at their child realistically? Or do they still have that pie in the sky reality for their child? I mean, these are just the different things. So that when you walk into the meeting or you have that first conversation, it isn't like starting from the bare bottom. You simply say, I had a chance to talk to Timmy's teacher from last year. She shared XYZ. I'm, looking forward, all the jargon. I'm looking forward to having Timmy in my class, la la la. And it's like you're building there, but you have that rapport, and you're hoping it's a positive one. So that way, as you go into it and you continue to work on your relationship with Timmy and his family, it's a positive and successful relationship. And a child with a disability has much to offer families. They just have to be given that opportunity, and hopefully they're in a loving environment that encourages that. So that way the child feels accepted and wanted, and overall just safe. It's really important that all people feel safe when they are at their most vulnerable, if I can put it that way. So are there any questions? I know we had to get through all these 3 chapters. It was only supposed to be 2, but with last week being having to be cut short for internship, we kind of had to run with it the way we had it. I do want to go over the fact that, if you haven't had a chance, please go and look at my announcement from, today is Wednesday. I believe I posted it Monday afternoon, which was the week 2 overview, because I did share your groups for not only the group assignments that are due on Sunday starting this week, but also I gave you a snapshot, or I showed you a screenshot of the disability topics for the manual. Let's see. And that's basically it. This is week 2. Next week, you do have a media review that's due. I did briefly touch on that in the very beginning. Your interview with an adult with a disability is also due next week as well. I can't stress enough how quickly this class will move. This is just week 2. Obviously, next week is week 3. But going into next week, I will go over more about the annotated bibliography and the different features that go along with your research paper. When you go into, I had it pulled up on another screen. Let's see. Is it still sharing my screen by any chance? It is not. When you go into la, 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 la. I want to say, here we go. The week 2 overview. It talks about the library guide for your research paper, which is due in week 3. When you click on it, just in case if you hadn't had a chance to do it already, it's going to pull you up to CDV. This was the old numbering for our course, but it's still the same. 3055 is 355, and it's going to go over everything that is needed for the research paper, including the 5 peer-reviewed scholarly journal articles. They have to be at least 3 years old. And even though we do have the wonderful Ryan library, you are also welcome to use Google Scholar. It just needs to be a peer-reviewed article. And Google Scholar, if you just go to the standard Google homepage and you type in Google Scholar, it'll pull it up, and you can go in and search for articles based off of certain topics, yearly time frames. If you're looking for, anything and everything, Google Scholar can do very similarly what the Ryan Library can do as well. And then feel free, as you're pulling these articles, feel free to continue to use them for your manual. That's if you choose to focus on the same topic. Not saying you have to, but if you choose to. And then from there, next week, I'm gonna pull a video about how to create an annotated bibliography from our Director of Writing over here at the Mission Valley campus, Dr. Kevin Doyle. And so I will either show the video from him or have him possibly jump into class next week to share how to go about properly setting up an annotated bibliography if A, you've forgotten how to do it, or B, you've never done it before and you just need a good template to work off of. So having done that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Or did it stop sharing all along? Nope, it stopped. Here we go. Yeah, I see there's one question. No, everything is clear. Oh, thank you, Victoria. Let's see. So if there aren't any other questions, pull everyone into here. We'll let Gabby get to her party. And I hope everyone has a great evening. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'm available. So if there's nothing else, I hope everyone has a great night, and I will work on getting this completely uploaded into class, just in case you want to take another hour and 50 minutes and watch it again, and all the technical difficulties I had tonight. But I will approach it differently next Wednesday because I tried something new and that didn't work out well for me. So lesson learned. But if there's nothing else, I hope everyone has a great evening, and I'll see you in the discussion boards and see you again face to face next Wednesday at 6:30. Okay, bye.